First of all, I should say I'm going to mention something that I've never heard anyone else talk about here is glider pilots. And I'll tell you up front, I never flew in a glider until about 1990, but I was in the program for a while. And when D-Day came along and I was standing outside my Quonset hut watching them tow gliders over to France, I was kind of glad to be going in the B-17.
That's the second choice.
When we went down to Oshkosh, I flew with a fellow by the name of Craig Stratsky, I think that's his name. But we got to talking and we found out that we both knew Dale Kreitz. And if you looked around the museum over there, you'll see a plaque for Dale and his brother. I think his name is Dean. I don't have notes, so I gotta ad-lib a little here. But they ran the what was originally the Waukesha County Airport, is now called Kreitz Field. And as I said, they got a plaque down there, and their name's also on a number of the bricks, which means they put up some of the money for the museum. Back to Dale after a bit. Between the time I got out of high school and Pearl Harbor came along, I made my way from a small town in central Kansas to a rooming house in the west side of Chicago. And we had 8 or 10 fellows there, depending on whether you counted the ones that paid rent or the ones that just needed a place to stay. And when Pearl Harbor came along, we'd had one fellow that was drafted. He happened to be back in town that afternoon. And I'll never forget, we took him out on Madison Avenue, the west side of Chicago, and dropped him off and started a big traffic jam right there because everybody wanted to pick him up and take him back to camp. A little side, I think Dick or somebody asked about being drafted into the Air Corps. And last spring I stopped and had lunch with a fellow in St. Louis, and he said yes, he was drafted, and the reason he got into the Air Corps was because he knew how to fold the little paper thing they gave him in the aptitude test. And he became an aircraft mechanic, so you probably don't know how your mechanics were selected. Anyway, I was at that time going to night classes down at Northwestern in Chicago, and we'd of course paid our tuition, so we were sweating it out whether we could finish up the session and get our credits, or whether we'd get drafted. Most of us are looking for a place to enlist, and of course the Air Corps was probably the most popular. But you could not you could not enlist in the Air Corps unless you were disqualified for cadets. Well, I knew I couldn't pass the test, the eye test for cadets, but I had to go take the exam anyway. And I did that, and we're trying to get lined up to enlist. When I got a call from a fellow up in Evanston, and he says, if we can get 10 fellows together, we can join the enlisted reserve corps and get into the glider training program. So he says, we think it'll take about $100 because you have to pay your own board and room. So I didn't have $100. I didn't know anybody that did. But the company I worked for had a policy that when you went in the armed forces, they give you $100. So I convinced my boss that the enlisted reserve corps was close enough to the Army, and they gave me the $100. So anyway, this fellow got the 10 people together, and we joined the enlisted reserve corps, and we ended up in Waukesha, Wisconsin at Waukesha County Airport. And there I met Dale Christ. I also met Dean. Dean sat in the back office and ran the airport, and Dale did his best to teach us to fly. Also met a fellow by the name of V.P. Batha, who was on the faculty of Carroll College, and he ran the ground school part of that program. And I'll never forget in the classroom there was a big coved ceiling there, and up on there was the famous formula A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now I always said if you could remember that, you could pass 90% of the exams that the Air Corps gave you. But we asked him, how come he left it up there? He says, well, they wanted to go to all that effort to get a grade in my class. I just decided I'd leave it there. So anyway, we took our lessons there and got our private pilot's license. Here I was back in Chicago. The Air Corps didn't want us now. And of course I was back there and didn't have any money and didn't have a job. So I scrambled around looking for some work. It was just before Christmas, so I got a job putting names on Christmas cards, which was a job you could work at many hours as you could stand up, I guess. Anyway, finally the Air Corps decided that they were ready for us. And my first orders were to Roswell, New Mexico. We got down there. By this time we could begin to learn that the glider pilot program was a little different. I always suspected that most of the people that were put in charge of it were serving a penalty for something they'd done in the regular Air Corps. I don't know whether that's true, but I suspected that. Anyway, we got down there and we were on the air base there, but they said, well, we got a few Cubs and Roncas out at the municipal airport. They weren't going to let us fly on the air base. And so they said, you can go down there and fly them. Well, we got down there and found out they didn't have any mechanics. And none of us were mechanics, but we worked at it, and once in a while we'd get them to run and we'd fly. But that's about as far as we got. The other thing I remember about Roswell was the food. It's one of the, I would say it's the best GI mess I was ever in. It's probably a cadet mess hall. I remember one day we counted 21 different items on the menu. And every Friday night you got fried pork chops off the grill and beer. Also the only place I ever was where they served beer on the line. Little did I know that a few months later I'd be in Buckley Field, which without a doubt, the worst food that I ever found in the Air Corps. And there wasn't a McDonald's within 100 miles. So anyway, we were there, I suppose, 2 or 3 weeks, and we were shipped out to what they call Bedstick. And we were up at Tucumcari, New Mexico. I figured, well, there's an air base up there, or at least a municipal airport that we could fly off from. But we got up there, and we were housed in a little hotel on the main street of Tucumcari. And our rec room became the overflow for the bar on Saturday night. Anyway, first time we went out to fly, there was no airport. There was no municipal airport either. They just lined up a bunch of GI trucks, and that was the runway. And in this dead stick, you took Cub or Ronco, whatever we had, up as far high as you could, which was in New Mexico is about 7,000 feet, because you're already up 5, and bring them in over the field, and put it in a slip, and stick it on the ground at about 90 miles an hour, and you're just out in range country, so you can imagine how rough it was. It proved how well those Cubs were made, because they really bounced when you were out there. So we survived that. But I'll never forget the first night we were there. We couldn't get any sleep because the mice were making so much noise. So we went out and bought traps. The next night we couldn't get any sleep because the traps kept going on. I don't know whether we ever got them all, but we put up a battle anyway. And that was kind of interesting duty. You walked your tours out in the parking lot and climbed Tucumcari Mountain, if any of you have ever been to Tucumcari. But we finished, and it came time they brought a bunch of pilots from various bases around there. Here again, I suspected they were sent up there to check ride glider pilots because they were in trouble for something else with the Air Corps. But the morning came for check rides, and we were fogged in. And we got up and said, well, we're not going to fly today. Wrong. They said, we're not going to stay overnight again, so we're going to do it. We got a ceiling of 300 to 500 feet. You know, you can't do much with that. And but anyway, we went out, did a few turns and so on. I hadn't had much experience with officers because I hadn't been in very long. Didn't have any basic training. That was one of the advantages we got from the enlisted reserve corps. We didn't have any basic training, which came back to haunt me at one point. A few years later, when President Roosevelt died, I think I was in Las Vegas. Might have been in Albuquerque, but I got called over to the orderly room, and the lieutenant said to me, "You're the ranking non-com here, and we're going to have a parade." And I said, "I don't know anything about running a parade." I don't know what he said to me, but the meaning was clear. He says, "That's your problem." So I was lucky enough to find an old master sergeant with a whole bunch of hash marks on there, and he helped me out. But you know, you can imagine being told you got to get 3,000 or 4,000 people on a parade ground when you don't know anything about it. So anyway, back to Tucumcari. We got out there and we couldn't do it. You know, you can't do very many spins at 500 feet. So we got done. And the lieutenant says to me, "Let's go back to the base." Back to the these runways were always moving because every time the wind changed, they'd move the GI truck. So sometimes it was a little tricky to find out where you were supposed to land. But anyway, I started back, and he says, "The landing strip's over here." And I said, "I don't think so." And he says, "Well, it is. You better go that way." So I turned around and I said, "Well, now we're going that way. Where do you want to go?" And so as I didn't have much experience arguing with lieutenants. So. But anyway, he finally said, "Well, you take it back." So we got back and landed, and I never did find out whether he was putting me on or not. But we got back, and of course, I think they all knew at that time that the glider training program was going to be scrapped. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have let us be checked out that day. But anyway, that was the end of the glider training program as far as I was concerned. And there was a rumor at that point that the reason they had all these glider pilots was that they asked 3 generals how many they thought they would need, and they all turned in their estimate, but they forgot to divide by 3. There again, I don't know whether that's true. Anyway, we all ended up down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the airfield down there for reassignment. And we thought that we had about 5,000 of us down there. We thought that we'd take over Albuquerque. The MPs had a different idea. But we must have influenced them a little bit, because after the first weekend, they had a new order that only 1/3 of the glider pilots could go into town at one time. So from there, I did the usual things that gunners do, I guess. I ended up as a gunner on a B-17. We had lots of people here talk about missions and so on. I'll only mention two missions. One, well, before I get there, there's a book around there, I've seen several copies of it, called The Wrong Stuff, written by Truman Smith. And I started looking, I got interested in it because he flew almost exactly the same missions that our crew did. And in fact, he was in the 384th, I believe, and I was in the 94th. And we used to furnish airplanes for each other when we were short on formations and so on. But I think I looked at his mission schedule and ours. I think we flew 8 of the same missions that he was on. But the mission, I think the date is April 18th, 44. We went to Berlin, and there was a confusion. There was lots of weather was bad, and there was lots of confusion. I don't know. Maybe some of you people were on that mission, but it turned out that the part of the group went one way and part of it went the other, and the escorts all went with the group that we weren't on. So we got hit by ME-109s and 190s pretty badly. We lost, the group lost 11 planes that day. We lost 4 out of our 6 within about 5 minutes. And so we were on our own pretty much all the way back. We made it. A lot of them didn't. The other mission I wanted to mention, and this Truman Smith was on this mission too, and went down by Lyons, France to drop supplies to the Free French, Marquis, whatever they call them. He talks about buzzing some girls in a building down there. We were down about 500 feet. I didn't see any place where you could do that, but maybe he used a little Hollywood imagination there in his book. But, that turned out to be my last mission. After D-Day, they'd said you could fly unlimited missions. Our major says, I can't do anything about that, but I could send you home for 30 days. So, to go back to this mission on down to southern France, most of my information comes from a diary that our bombardier kept. He talks about seeing 4 fighters. Truman Smith talks about seeing 6. And they dived on them from above, but he says they must have been pretty inexperienced because all 6 of them crashed into the ground and didn't have enough room to pull out. So anyway, as I say, that I didn't know it at the time, but that turned out to be my last mission. We came home for 30 days and got back as far as Atlantic City. They took the officers back, but they didn't take any of the enlisted men back. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, couldn't make up my mind. So I ended up on a B-29 crew. And here I got my, I got my tour on B-24s at this point. They had B-20, when we got to Las Vegas, I think it was, they had B-29 gunnery equipment on B-24s. And that was kind of an interesting experience because they always flew with the tail down. You always were not sure when they were going to stall out. We made it. And I was in Albuquerque on B-20. We were scheduled to go to the South Pacific in September when the war was over in August. And if you had enough points, you were on your way home very quickly because one thing they didn't need was B-29 gunners after the war was over. Thank you.